Sunday brunch, sun on the porch, coffee breathing steam, me cutting a lemon for pancakes. Ordinary. Then my dad slid a silver key across my plate and said, calm as weather, we'll move in next week. I didn't pick it up. I slid the key back, wiped my fingers and said, no. That tiny word saved my home. And if you stick with me, you'll see the part of this story no one in my family wants you to know. I'm Lila Tran 30, product designer remote. I grew up in a loud house where opinions traveled faster than facts. My parents, Bao and Lynn, love big and control bigger. My sister, Marissa, 33, sparkling a gravity field, has always been the center of the orbit. I was the steady one. Translation, the safe shelf where everyone put their problems. For 6 years, I lived like a monk to buy a place of my own. No vacations, no brunch unless I had coupons. I sold my car and biked. Canceled streaming. Took freelance gigs after my day job. I tracked every dollar in a color-coded spreadsheet that looked like confetti and sadness. People joked I dated my savings account. They weren't wrong. The house I chose isn't fancy. A 1938 bungalow on a crooked street in Willow Bend, a lake town an hour from the city. Cedar siding, chipped white trim, a tiny attic with a window like a ship's porthole. The porch tilts a little. The floors talk at night. The kitchen was redone by someone who liked open shelves and chaos. I fell in love the second I touched the warm, scarred banister. It felt like a handshake. Welcome, I hold. I told almost no one. Not my parents, not Marissa. Keeping it quiet wasn't cruel, it was smart. They mean well until meaning well turns into driving the bus from the passenger seat. I wanted a first month where every change in this house was mine. Paint colors, light fixtures, the silence. Move-in day was rain and relief. I dragged boxes inside, made a pallet on the floor, and fell asleep listening to the lake hush. In the morning, I ate toast on the porch and watched a blue heron land like a folded letter on the water. I cried then, quick and private. Not from sadness, from release. My neighbor met me the second afternoon. Mr. Alden, 68, retired shop teacher with arms like rope and a garden that could feed a village. He brought tomatoes and a warning delivered like small talk. Old places, remember. They keep stories under the paint, he said, tapping my railing. Yours used to be the Soria place. Folks still talk about it. Soria made my ears prick. My maternal grandma's maiden name is Soria. Coincidence, probably. But the word floated in my mind like a leaf you can't catch. Mr. Alden shrugged, set the tomatoes down, and pointed at my porch light. That fixture flickers when it rains. Put a bead of silicone around the base. Welcome to the block. I built a routine. Work in the mornings at the dining table I bought from a thrift store for $40 and 2 aspirin. Paint at night. Sage in the living room. Deep teal in the tiny office. I sanded a bookshelf until my hands buzzed. I learned the neighbor dog's bark and the mail truck's schedule. I slept like a child who trusts the dark. I also ignored the first breadcrumb. A red mark on the doorframe at knee height, like someone had braced a toolbox there and slid it by mistake. I wiped it off and forgot it. 2 weeks in, I invited 3 friends for a quiet housewarming. Ria brought pho. Kenji installed a smart thermostat because he can't visit a house without touching wires. Nora walked through each room and told me which corner needed a plant and which corner needed grief to be released. That's Nora. She speaks in feng shui and feelings. Over dinner, we talked about anything but family. Then Ria asked, "So are your folks coming to see the place?" I chewed, stalled, then told the truth. I haven't told them yet. Kenji blinked. Bold, why? Because last time I shared a plan, I ended up doing their plan, I said. I want to know what I like before anyone tells me what I should like. Nora nodded. You get 1 first month. Guard it. She squeezed my shoulder. And lock everything. We laughed, but I added a deadbolt to the back door that night. It felt silly. It also felt like breathing. The second breadcrumb arrived in my mailbox. A glossy flyer for an estate liquidator circled in pink highlighter. On the back, a note in looping script. We can stage the main bedroom call T. No envelope, no card. I don't know a T. I tossed it, then pulled it back out and took a photo. A day later, I got a text from Marissa. Marissa? Hey baby sis. Random? What are your thoughts on Willow Bend schools? Dylan's job might move us closer to the lake. I stared at the screen. The timing itched. I typed, no idea, and left it at that. I should tell you about Marissa. She's luminous. She can charm a parking ticket into an apology. She also burns through money like it's paper in a fireplace. Our parents call it optimism. I call it math. When she and Dylan had twins, my mother practically moved in with them. Family helps family, she said every time I asked why I was alone at my college graduation dinner while they threw a catered week for Marissa's gender reveal. I stopped asking. My parents have a saying. Houses are for families. It sounds sweet until you realize which family they mean. Hint, not the one-person kind. The third breadcrumb was a shadow. I was on my porch at dusk sorting paint chips when a minivan rolled slow past my house. Same route, same speed. 3 nights in a row. On night 4, it paused. The driver lifted a phone lens glinting. A photo. I stepped forward. The van moved, not in a hurry, just certain I wasn't worth the conversation. I wrote down the plate. Then I told myself I was being dramatic. Work kept me sane. I designed buttons and flows while a storm combed the lake with white teeth. My porch light flickered. Mr. Alden called, "Told you!" We laughed over the fence. When the rain stopped, I sealed the fixture with silicone exactly like he'd said. It still flickers when it misses attention. Same honestly. I finally told my parents about the house on a video call I scheduled like a dentist appointment. I bought a place, I said. I'm safe. I'm happy. Silence. Then my mother's smile stretched too wide. Oh, Lila, that's big where... Willow Bend. My father leaned out of frame. Papers rustled. My mother's eyes glittered. Lowit near the lake. Yes, Audrey. Yes, she asked light as, powdered sugar. Why I asked back. To send you plants, she said. For luck. I'm allergic to lilies, I said. I'll text you later. She laughed high and careful. Of course. I didn't text. 2 mornings later, I woke to the soft thunk of something hitting my porch. I opened the door to find a doormat I did not buy. CrossFit font. Welcome home, family. The tag was still on. Under it, a manila envelope. Inside, photocopies of old newspaper clippings. Headline, Soria Bungalow to be starter house for young families 1966. A photo of my porch nearly the same. In blue ink on the corner, back where it belongs, M. My heart knew the M. I still hoped it was someone else. I called Rhea. Tell me I'm not overreacting, I said, reading her the note. You're not. Keep everything. Document. And maybe tell your parents now on your terms. I already did, I said. Oh, she said. Then I guess they're telling you back. That afternoon, I noticed the faintest scratch around my front doorknob. Circular. Fresh. Like a key had turned and met resistance. I ran my finger over the metal and felt a grit of brass dust. I tasted pennies. I checked the smart cam Kenji installed. The feed showed Rainbirds the mail truck, Mr. Alden's hat. No one at my door. My stomach still stayed tight. I put the new doormat in the garage. I texted Nora to borrow her drill. I didn't think I'd need it. I just wanted it near. On the 4th Sunday, I hosted that brunch I mentioned. Pancakes, berries. The porch smelled like butter and new plans. My parents arrived with smiles and a casserole that could feed a choir. Marissa trotted up behind them, twins in matching overalls, Dylan carrying a cooler like an offering. It looked normal. It sounded normal. It was not. We hugged, we toured. They praised the paint, the light, the view. My mother opened cabinets she did not own. My father tested windows like a man buying a car. Marissa paused at the attic ladder and sighed. Imagine this as a nursery, she said, absent-minded like a weather report. We ate. We laughed. Then Dad slid the silver key toward me. We'll move in next week, he said, as if reading a calendar I hadn't seen. Dylan found a place to store their furniture until then. I stared at the key. It was labeled in black marker front copy, not my handwriting. I pushed it back. No. The table air changed temperature. My mother's smile fell like a curtain. Marissa's fork froze. Dad's jaw worked. We'll talk after dessert, my mother said. This is a happy day. It was not. It was the first day I understood exactly what I was up against. When they left, my porch looked the same. The lake looked the same. The key remained where I'd left it face up adair. I stepped inside, closed the door, and turned my lock. It caught. Not a clean click. A stick like metal teeth that didn't match anymore. I took a breath. Then I called a locksmith of my own. Creeping suspicion. The locksmith came before sunset, toolbox, rattling rain still in the air. He studied the deadbolt, tilted his head, and said, "Someone tried to turn a copy. See these tiny burrs, cheap metal. It chewed your pins." He showed me the dust I'd felt fine as sand stuck in the strike. He didn't dramatize it. He just replaced the cylinder, upgraded the plate, and installed a high-security bolt that clicked with a sound I trusted. He handed me 2 factory-cut keys in sealed bags and warned, "If anyone waves a shiny copy, again, it won't turn." When he left the house, felt heavier, like it finally knew I would defend it. I made tea and called Rhea. I told her about the key on my plate, the burrs in the lock, the doormat I didn't buy. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "You're not paranoid. You're noticing. Big difference." She offered to stay over. I said I'd be okay. We both knew okay was a moving target. At 9, the minivan rolled by again. Same speed, same hush. This time, I stood behind the curtain with my phone ready and caught a clear shot of the plate and the bumper sticker, an orange cartoon fish for a local swim school. I sent the photo to Kenji with one line, "Seen this?" He called me back in 60 seconds. "That's a rental, Lakefront Motors." I know because Dylan used them last summer when his car died, and he wouldn't stop complaining about the deposit. My throat tightened. "You're sure I sat in it?" he said. "They slapped that swim sticker on everything." He paused, voice softer. "Do you want me to swing by?" I pictured him driving across town with snacks and tools just because I sounded small. I said yes. He showed up with a headlamp, opened my cam settings, and checked the logs the way a medic checks a pulse. "No motion alert on the door," he said, "because the camera points out, not down. If someone used a key at noon, your lens saw a sparrow. We should add a contact sensor." He installed one while I held the flashlight and tried not to shake. The sensor chirped when the door closed. The sound felt like a promise. In the morning, a postal notice slid under my door. It was a gray postcard with polite boxes. "Confirming your change of address request," it said, and then the names Marissa Lamb and Dylan Lamb, new address, my address. My hands went cold. I read it twice slow to be sure I wasn't inventing letters. I called the number on the card and got a recorded voice that explained the process like a cooking show. I hung up before it reached step 3 and called the post office instead. A clerk named Alma picked up. I told her the card had my address, but not my consent. She spoke like a person who untangles knots every day. "If you didn't submit it, it's not valid," she said. "Come in with ID, we'll flag it." I thanked her and sat on the floor because my knees felt like borrowed parts. A memory floated up, bright as a flint spark, my mother at Thanksgiving saying, "There's always a way to fix a bad address. You just need the right forms." It had sounded like a tip back then. Now it felt like a blueprint. I drove to the post office, handed Alma my ID, and watched her type with calm speed. She stamped the card and wrote, "Canceled," in ink that bled a little on the cheap paper. "You'll get another letter saying it's void," she said. "If anything else comes for them, bring it in." I walked out into the sun, feeling like I had returned a stitch to the right seam. On the way home, I stopped by Mr. Alden's gate. He was pruning tomatoes, hat-low smile ready. I told him about the locksmith and the postcard. He didn't say "I told you" or "That's wild." He said "I saw your sister here 2 mornings ago measuring your porch with a tape." He held his hands apart, showing the length. "I thought she was helping you pick a swing." My heartbeat changed cadence. "She didn't knock," I said. "She didn't text me." He frowned at the soil, something like regret moving across his face. "Next time I'll ask." I thanked him for seeing what he saw. Validation isn't loud. It's a steady light in a confusing room. Back inside, I pulled the estate flyer from the drawer. Pink circle. "We can stage the main bedroom call T." I dialed the number with my thumb and kept my voice even when a woman answered, bright and busy. "Thalia Estate Services," she said. "Thalia speaking." I said I was calling about the bedroom staging, careful not to give a name. She jumped in like we were mid-call already. Oh good, your mom said Wednesday was fine for measuring and Friday for install if the crib arrives. We'll keep it neutral eggshell and wheat, very model home. We can hide a lot in baskets. My spine turned to ice. I asked, which mom told you that? She hesitated for the first time. Lynn, she said. She was very specific about the attic as a play space and the twins' schedule. The twins! I thanked her, hung up, and set the phone down gently so I didn't slam it. The house hummed around me, innocent and old. I walked room to room, touching door frames like I was taking attendance. My office, my little teal cave, my living room with the sage walls and the thrift table, my porch that tilts like a question. I had chosen each thing. Someone I loved had printed a plan over it like tracing paper. I called my mother. No pleasantries. Did you request a change of address for Marissa? Did you hire a staging company? She breathed out like I'd interrupted a nap. Lila, you're being dramatic. We were helping. Houses are for families. I am family, I said. My voice surprised me. It was calm and shaped like a line you do not cross. You don't get to move people into my home. You don't get to copy my key. She tried to sound wounded and reasonable at once. We thought you'd be lonely, she said. And you have space. Dylan's contract is in flux. This solves so many problems. It creates one, I said. And it's big. She shifted strategy. Your grandmother would want this. The Soria place always held babies. I stared at the wall because if I closed my eyes, I would see her pulling strings. What do you mean, Soria place? I asked. Who told you that? Silence. Then the smile in her voice returning too light. Oh, an old neighbor. Everyone knows it. I ended the call because there was nothing honest left in it. The name Soria unspooled again louder. I opened the drawer with the old clippings. The headline called my house starter home for young families. The photo showed my porch. The caption mentioned a councilwoman who cut the ribbon, Teresa Soria Hale. My chest went tight in a new way. My grandmother's maiden name is Soria. My mother's stories about her side of the family are always fog and sentiment, never specifics. Maybe Soria Place isn't just an old nickname. Maybe it's a claim they feel paper thin and paper strong. I needed facts, not fog. I drove to the county records office, a brick box that smelled like toner and stories. A clerk named Devin showed me how to pull chain of title records. We scrolled through deeds like flipping a family album. The house had changed hands 6 times since 1938. In 1966, a deed transferred from Soraya H. to Hale M. The initials meant little without context, but they glowed anyway. The last transfer, the one to my cellar, was clean. No liens, no disputes. Devin said, looks ordinary, and printed the list for me. Ordinary on paper can still be a knot in the world. On the way out, an elderly woman at the copy machine watched my pages slide out and said, You're looking up the Soria bungalow. My aunt worked the ribbon cutting. I asked her what she remembered. She smiled at a spot past my left ear, hunting a memory. There was lemonade, and a fight 2 weeks later. Something about who got to live there first. She shook her head, gentler now. Old towns are full of reruns. I drove home with the records on the passenger seat, like a small dog watching traffic. The minivan appeared again, then turned away when I turned onto my street. I parked, sat still, and listened to the lake fold and refold itself. The house smelled like paint and tea and cedar. I checked the new contact sensor. Solid. I checked the windows. Latched. I checked my porch light. Dry, no flicker. I checked my email and found 3 updates from Thalia. A sample board, a soft reminder that nursery items are sourced, and a note that read, Perlin key will be in lockbox by Thursday. I typed a reply with clean sentences. Cancel all appointments. The owner does not consent. Do not step on this property. Then I forwarded the thread to Ria and Kenji, and BCC'd a lawyer I found through a tenant rights clinic last year when I helped Nora with a landlord who loved threats more than repairs. I didn't know yet if I needed a lawyer. I knew I needed a witness. At midnight, I woke to a small sound not inside but close. The sensor stayed quiet. The cam showed only moths and a pale slice of street. I held my breath and heard it again to the left, low, like someone dragging something soft across wood. I tiptoed to the porch window and peeked. The new doormat was back. Same font, same message tag snipped this time. Beside it sat a plastic storage bin with a label in neat marker, nursery keep out of reach. I didn't open it. I took a photo. Then I called Mr. Alden. He answered on the second ring voice thick with sleep and said, "I'm coming." He stood with me on the porch in his robe and boots flashlight, painting a steady circle around the bin. He said, "Do you want me to carry this into my garage for a while?" I nodded. "Chain it to a memory," I said, half joke, half wish. He smiled sadly. "We'll chain it to the truth." As he hauled the bin away, he paused and looked at the edge of my porch rail. A tiny glint. He plucked a clear plastic tag holder wedged under a screw. Inside was a slip of paper printed with a code 4 digits and 2 letters. He whistled. "Lockbox code," he said. My phone pinged. A new email from Thalia confirmed. "Lockbox code will be 14B7LM as discussed." The letters matched the paper. L.M. Lamb. My sister's married name. I stared at the code until the numbers lost shape. Then I laughed once short and shocked because the scheme had gotten sloppy and that made me feel less small. The next move was mine. I opened a blank note and wrote a list in block type change mailbox lock. Add camera at door height. File a police report for attempted fraudulent address change. Send a cease and desist to Thalia. Meet with Alma to place a hold on any forwarding. Ask Devin about the ribbon-cutting files. Call Grandma about the name Soria and listen with new ears. At the bottom, I wrote one more line. Don't let them narrate this. The house settled around me, old and awake. I locked my new lock. It clicked like a sentence ending in a period, not a question. And I finally slept, not because nothing could happen, but because I had decided what I would do when it did. Revelation building. I woke before my alarm and opened my list. Small steps first. I changed the mailbox lock. Alma placed a hold on any forwarding and flagged my address for extra checks. She promised to call if another request appeared. I filed a report for attempted mail fraud. The desk sergeant kept it brisk, but he gave me a case number and told me to keep all physical evidence. I added a second camera at door height. Kenji synced it and tested alerts until the app sang. Then Mr. Alden called about the plastic bin in his garage. He said we should open it together on my porch with the camera pointed down. We set the bin on the boards and peeled the tape like surgeons. Inside were soft things, a crib sheet with clouds, a set of plastic drawer labels, a roll of painter's tape, a printed floor plan of my house traced with a thick marker. Arrows pointed to crib here and toy shelf here, and remove this door for flow. At the bottom, a stapled work order from Thalia with a note in easy handwriting key in lockbox, Thu 9 a.m., code 14B7LM, the same code on the little tag Mr. Alden found. The initials hit harder now. Kenji whistled low. They wrote it down. That's something. He slid the order into a clear sleeve and handed it back like a relic. I felt heat in my cheeks and a cold line down my spine. The funny thing is, the plan was tidy. There was a timetable, a code, a sequence of entry. It looked like any project plan from work. It just treated my life as space to be optimized. I called Thalia again. She sounded flustered this time. She said she had received my email and was pausing the job. She said Lynn had insisted the owner approved everything. She said she would issue a refund of the deposit and email a statement that no one from her company had stepped onto my property. I asked for that in writing. Minutes later, it arrived. Kenji read it and nodded. It's a wall, he said. Keep stacking them. I called Devin at Records and asked about materials from the 1966 ribbon cutting. He sounded pleased by the hunt. He found a file of clippings and a thin folder with a typed memo on onion paper. I drove over. The memo named the pilot program Starter Homes for Willow Bend. It listed donors and a city match. It said the houses were intended for lottery winners who met income limits. It also listed a dispute 2 weeks later when a woman named Marisol Soria demanded priority for blood family and was denied. The memo called it a heated exchange and mentioned the councilwoman by name, Teresa Soria Hale. There was no clause granting any family special rights. There was also a clean line that read, Properties shall convey in fee simple, without encumbrance, and with no reservation of life estate or familial claim. Devin tapped that line and said, "That's lawyer talk, for nobody gets to call dibs for life." He made me a copy. On the way out, the same elderly woman from last time pointed at the photo taped to the file's inside cover. It showed two women cutting ribbon together. My eyes caught the smile of the one with dark hair and a dimple. I had seen that smile in old albums. The caption named her Teresa, my grandmother's cousin. The other woman stood a step back, jaw tight. The caption called her a neighborhood representative. Her name was Marisol. The fight had faces now. I sat in my car and called my grandmother. Her voice came small at first, then clear as we talked. I asked what she remembered about Teresa and the houses. She told me Teresa believed in making new starts for young families who had little. She told me Teresa asked her relatives to support the lottery and not demand special treatment. Then my grandmother sighed. She said my mother hated that. She said my mother grew up hearing that their side had been robbed. She said the phrase Soria Place was a story, not law. Your mother likes to make wishes into rules, she said, soft and sad. She thinks that protects the people she loves. I asked if she had ever told my mother to stop. She said yes many times. Then she said something that stayed with me all day. Protection without permission is control. I drove home slower. The lake flashed between trees like a thought that kept returning. At my curb, a white envelope waited under the mat. No stamp. Inside was a letter with a heavy font and a watermark I did not recognize. It came from a lawyer whose name rang a faint bell. The letter claimed my house would be more secure if I permitted temporary family occupancy while financial adjustments were made. It used phrases like implied license and moral easement. It said a notice of interest could be recorded if we failed to cooperate. It was not a threat by name. It was one by structure. I checked the signature block and knew why the name rang. The lawyer played golf with my dad. I called Rhea and read her the letter. She did not swear. She took a breath and said, "We send a response. We make them put it all on paper. We keep calm." She offered to come over that night. I said yes. While we waited for Dark, Kenji drove to Lakefront Motors. He claimed he needed washer fluid to get onto the lot and looked around. He spotted the minivan with the orange fish sticker in a line of returns. A tag in the window read, "Due 5 p.m. He asked the clerk if a man named Dylan still rented the same model. The clerk shrugged and said they did not give out names. Kenji apologized and bought the fluid. But he watched. 10 minutes later, Dylan pulled up in a rideshare, spoke to the manager, and left with a different van. Kenji texted me a photo from across the street. He wrote, "He's not subtle." I stared at the photo until my hands stopped shaking. Then I went to my kitchen and set 2 glasses on the counter. One for Rhea, one for me. Mr. Alden knocked right at 6. He carried a small photo album. He said he had asked around and found old block party pictures that included my porch. He wanted me to see something. In one photo from 1997, my mother stood on the steps with a woman I did not recognize. They both looked younger and fierce. On the back, someone had written Lynn and Marisol reunion still at it. Mr. Alden tapped the caption with a finger. "They've practiced this fight a long time," he said. The album held other small facts. A shot of a rusty lockbox on the porch rail in 2002 during a repaint. A caption joked about the code being easy to guess. 4 digits and initials. The habit had a history. That made the code in my email feel less random and more ritual. Rhea arrived with dinner and a folder. Inside were templates for a cease and desist and a notice to trespass. We filled in names and dates and printed them with the stiff certainty of forms. We placed copies in clear sleeves and a hard copy for the porch. We wrote a simple line across the top in thick marker, "The owner does not consent to entry by anyone." Kenji installed a small sign camera at shoulder height to watch the paper. We set a trap for time, not people. As the sun dropped, I planned the next morning. I would take the letter from the golf lawyer to a real one. I would meet Devin again to check if any notice of interest had been filed. I would ask Alma if any new cards had tried to slip through. Then one more call. I called my father. He answered on the second ring, voice steady, like I had just asked for a recipe. I told him about the lawyer letter. He said it was just to open a conversation. I told him about the lockbox code. He said that was a convenience. I told him about the change of address. He said that was a mix-up. His words tried to sand everything down. I did not let them. I said the words I needed to say next in short steps so I did not fall. I said I love you. I said this is my house. I said no one moves in. I said if anyone puts a lockbox on my railing or steps over my line, I will call the police and press charges. I said if any document gets filed to cloud my title, I will answer with counsel. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, "You're making this ugly." I said I'm keeping it true. I slept with both cameras armed and my phone loud. At 6:42 a.m., the door camera pinged. A hand entered the frame holding a metal bracket. The hand wore a thin gold bracelet I knew by heart, my mother's. The bracket hooked over my porch rail. The hand lifted a gray box into place. The code strip glowed. 14B7 LM. My sign watched the hand for 2 long beats, then the hand dragged the paper aside and stuck the lockbox square onto the rail. I opened my door. The air was cold. Gravel scratched under my bare feet. My mother looked up, surprised, then smoothed her face as if we had a brunch. I stepped onto the porch and stood between her and the box. That was the moment when the plan on paper met the person in the house. The sky was a hard, ordinary blue, and I understood what the next hour would cost. The moment of truth. I did not shout. I stood between my mother and the lockbox and spoke like I was reading a weather report. "Remove it." She smiled like we were planning a brunch and said I was making a scene. The metal bracket rocked under her hand. The lake breathed behind us. My new contact sensor sat silent because the door was still closed. I lifted my phone, hit record, and read the notice I had taped beside the door. The owner does not consent to any entry. No lockboxes, no staging, no temporary occupancy. Trespass will be reported. Her eyes flicked to the camera and back to my face. She tried the old script anyway. "This is family. You're alone here. You need help." Then the minivan turned onto the street. Same orange fish sticker. Dylan stepped out with a measuring tape on his belt and that half smile he uses when he wants something for free. Marissa climbed out after him, twins in the second row with juice boxes. A small moving truck rumbled in behind them and eased to the curb in a position that suggested practice. "Mister?" Alden appeared at his gate in his boots and hat, slow and present, like a witness called by the morning. Ria's car pulled in behind the truck. Kenji slid out of the passenger seat with a small toolbox and a calm face eyes on the lockbox. We all took our marks without speaking. My mother reached for the code strip. She tapped 14B7LM as if entering a birthday. The box blinked red. She tried again. Red again. She looked at me confused. I kept my voice steady. "This one needs a fingerprint to wake before code." She frowned because the plan needed small myths to work. I stepped around her, lifted the bracket, and slid the box off the rail. It was heavier than it looked. The edge bit my palm. The weight made my arm shake. Metal hit wood with a sound that belonged in a garage, not on my porch, and the latch popped. The lid tipped open an inch. I did not mean to look, but the truth sat there in neat rows. 5 keys on silver rings each with a label in fresh marker, front back office attic mailbox. There was also a manila envelope with a typed form on top. The words "Notice of Interest" sat in bold like a stamp you don't want to see. The signature line was empty. My name was filled in. My mother moved to close the lid. I put my hand on it and held. The keys were bright, like coins in a fountain. The mailbox tag made my stomach go cold. I lifted it with 2 fingers. It did not match my new lock. That did not matter. Intent glowed brighter than brass. My mother said the keys were for convenience. Dylan said the mailbox key was a mistake. Marissa whispered that I was being harsh. The twins watched us through the glass, wide-eyed, learning something no cartoon had taught them. I took a slow breath and tasted cedar and rain. The porch tilt felt sharper, as if the boards leaned toward the edge of a cliff. I laid each key on the rail and photographed them. Kenji read off the labels to the camera with a steady voice so the record would show more than pictures. Ria placed the cease and desist on the mailbox and held it there with a strip of painter's tape, hands, gentle eyes hard. Mr. Alden did not step onto my porch. He stood right at the property line and said plain as a bell that he saw who placed the box and when. He pointed to my door camera and added that it saw it too. He was not angry, he was precise. Precision is a kind of mercy. My phone buzzed. A call from Alma. I put it on speaker. She said an in-person change of address attempt had just been flagged at her counter. A woman claimed to be me and tried to authorize forwarding for Marissa and family. Alma asked for ID. The woman left. She described the scarf and the shoes. Marissa looked down at the scarf around her neck and went very still. Dylan muttered something about errands and stared at the truck as if willing it to vanish. My mother drew herself up and shifted the topic with the skill of a person who hates corners. She said the Soria bungalow had always been meant for babies, that we were only returning the house to its purpose. She reached for history like a rope. I picked up the manila envelope and held it next to the old memo I had copied from Devon. The one that said plainly, there was no reserved claim, only fee, simple, clean, and ordinary. I read the line out loud. No reservation of life estate or familial claim. My voice did not shake. The sound seemed to take space and make walls. My mother's smile thinned. The twins' juice straws squeaked. The sky stayed blue, a hard, good blue, the kind that refuses to be dragged into drama. For a second, I felt everything at once, the grit of brass dust I'd felt days ago, the soft cotton of the crib sheet from the bin, the cool phone glass in my palm, the lake wind in my hair, the line on a county memo written decades before I was born, telling me I wasn't crazy. I looked at the lockbox again. In the bottom sat a slim plastic sleeve with a small card. It was Thalia's site access pass printed yesterday with my address and a note in pen, owner's mother will meet installer. The letters slanted cheerful. The cheer scraped. I took the sleeve and slid it into my own folder. Then I said we were done. No raised voice, no speech, just the end of a sentence. Dylan lifted his hands as if to show empty pockets. He said they had nowhere to go. He said my house had space. He said he could build me a deck in exchange. He tried to make a deal because deals had worked for him before. I told him I had built a life on paying what things cost. That included boundaries. Marissa's eyes filled. She said she thought I wanted to be closer, that the twins would make the house bright. She believed some of this. She also knew a shortcut when she saw one. I told her I would babysit at her place, not mine, and that love is not a lease agreement. Then I turned to my mother and told her the thing she would hear even if she pretended not to. You do not place lockboxes on homes you do not own. You do not file papers with my name. You do not order doormats that rewrite my front step. You do not shrink my life to make room for your plan. She opened her mouth. I lifted my phone and dialed before the script could spool. I called the non-emergency line and gave my case number. I said the words clearly: attempted unauthorized installation, attempted mail fraud evidence on site parties present. The dispatcher said an officer would come by. My mother made a small, shocked sound like I had turned into a stranger. I was not a stranger. I was the same person who used to swallow storms to keep dinner smooth. I had just put the storm down. While we waited, I did one more thing that felt like taking back my hands. I climbed the attic ladder and pulled the porthole window open to clear heat. Light spilled across dust. In the edge where the rafters met the wall, something blinked. A flat tin lay tucked behind old insulation, the kind of box people use for buttons and love letters. I eased it free and popped the lid. Inside lay clippings brittle as leaves, a ribbon scrap, a Polaroid of the Need 66 porch, and a folded page with neat typing and a blue signature. Teresa's name. The page was a short letter to future keeper of this house. It said a home is a trust you choose every day, not a prize someone can claim later. It asked the keeper to guard the key in the story. It was not legal language. It was better. It was a blessing and a reminder. The edges cut my thumb and left a thin red line. I pressed the page to my heart for one beat and then slid it into a sleeve. When I came down the ladder, my mother was watching me with an expression I had never seen. Not anger, not triumph. Something like recognition that the story she carried had developed a spine without her. The truck idled at the curb. and then rumbled away because the driver was not paid to get arrested. Kenji set the lockbox on the porch floor and waited. Ria stood beside me like a lighthouse you can lean on. Mr. Alden still held the line like a fence post in a flood. When the patrol car turned onto our street, the sound of its tires on gravel was the most ordinary thing in the world. I had thought this moment would feel like fireworks or collapse. It felt like a lock finally turning the right way. I stepped forward to meet the officer with my folder, my video, my keys, and a story that made sense all the way through. Execution and decision. The officer stepped out of the cruiser with a calm face and a notebook that looked tired from other people's mornings. I introduced myself, handed over my folder, and showed the video of my mother placing the lockbox, the 5 labeled keys, the email thread from Thalia, and the call log with Alma, Mr. Alden gave his name and said what he saw at 6:42 a.m. Ria and Kenji confirmed the timeline. The officer asked my mother who authorized the box. She said the family like it was a legal entity. He shook his head, pointed to my notice, and explained trespass in small, ordinary words. He photographed the box and the keys, logged the labels, and issued a written warning to my mother, to Dylan, and to Marissa, each copy signed and dated. He told them any further attempt to enter or install anything would become a chargeable offense. Dylan muttered about miscommunication. Marissa asked if we could handle this without police energy. The officer's voice stayed even. He guided my mother to remove the bracket, watched her do it, and then waited while Kenji sealed the tiny holes in my rail with putty so no one could claim the hardware was theirs. He gave me a card with the case number and suggested I consider a civil harassment order if the behavior continued. When he left, the street felt wider. The minivan eased away. The moving truck followed empty as truth after it's been told. My mother lingered by the curb phone to her ear, speaking in a tone she saves for bankers and pastors. I did not go to her. I stood on my porch and watched the lake throw thin light at the shore. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an email from the county recorder. A document had been submitted against my parcel. Devin had signed me up for alerts the day I asked about the ribbon cutting, and that small favor paid off like a siren. I opened the PDF and read the title twice. Notice of interest in real property. Claimant Lamb Family Trust, agent the golf lawyer. It was stamped received, not yet recorded, but in the queue. My stomach dropped in a familiar, useless way, and then I steadied. I called Devin. He checked his system and said it was pending index. He told me I could bring a sworn owner's affidavit to contest it and request expedited review for fraudulent filings. He gave me the desk number for a supervisor and told me to use his name when I called. I wrote everything down in block letters. Then I called Ria's friend Evan, a real estate attorney, who has the kindest voice I've ever heard attached to the most precise emails. He answered on the second ring and listened to the story from the first key to the lockbox to the pending notice. He asked 2 questions, simple and surgical. Was there any written agreement with anyone granting occupancy? And had I ever given a key outside the locksmith's sealed pair? I said no and no. He said good. He drafted while we stayed on the phone a demand to withdraw the notice, a threat to seek sanctions under the wrongful lien statute, a proposed owner's affidavit for the recorder, and a cease and desist letter specific to my address, naming Lynn Dillon and Marissa individually. He told me to print and sign in front of a notary, then meet him at the recorder's office within the hour. I put on shoes. Mr. Alden stepped to his gate and said he'd keep an eye on the porch. Ria grabbed her keys. Kenji took the lockbox and the keys in a tote because evidence is easier to carry when it's zipped. At the UPS store, I signed before a notary who hummed while he stamped. At the recorder's counter, Evan slid the affidavit and my ID to the clerk, spoke to the supervisor Devin had named, and used the word clouded so calmly it sounded like weather we could drive out of. The supervisor read, conferred with a colleague, and stamped my affidavit, received with priority. They placed the notice of interest in suspense pending review, which meant it would not jump onto my title today and scare lenders or insurance. Evan filed our own owner's notice of no authorization, so the record would show my side, not just my defense. He also printed a packet for the police with the case number highlighted and the trespass warning attached. Then he looked at me the way doctors look at patients who have named the pain. And he said something that pinned me to myself in the best way your instincts have been right all week. Keep trusting them. We walked back into sun that smelled like warm pine and photocopy toner. On the drive home, Alma called to say the same woman had returned with a different scarf and the same story. This time, Alma stepped around the counter and pointed to a camera sign. The woman left again. We thanked her for being the grown-up in a room none of us could see. When we turned onto my street, a white sedan sat by the curb. The golf lawyer leaned against it in a suit the color of appointment calendars. He asked to talk. Evan stepped forward and gave his card. The lawyer started a sentence with, "In the spirit of family," and Evan ended it with, "Withdraw the notice, or we'll seek fees." The lawyer pivoted to a morality speech. Evan didn't take it. He repeated the statute numbers and the word sanctions with the kind of gentle that has edges. The lawyer's face shifted 2 degrees. He said he would review with his client. He left. I went inside and drank a glass of water like it was a ritual. Then I made a second list shorter and heavier, install a small gate at the side yard. Schedule a consult for a simple privacy hedge. Set the county's fraud alert to text and email. Change my email password because why not? Move original documents into a fire safe. Send certified copies of the cease and desist to Lynn and Dylan and Marissa. File for a temporary restraining order naming specific behaviors. Evan sent me the forms with sticky notes in the margins like a patient teacher. We filled them out at my dining table with the thrifted surface I had sanded until it felt like work. I wrote in small boxes the large facts of the last month and realized how clear a story becomes when you only tell the part that belongs to you. The unexpected obstacle arrived at dusk in the softest way, Marissa alone on my steps. No twins' eyes, tired hands empty. She said she came to apologize. She said she had not known about the lockbox until after the plan was in motion, which was not true because her initials were in the code. But I let the wind take that lie and leave the apology. She said Dylan had lost a contract, and the rent jumped, and pride made everything hard to say out loud. She said our parents told her this house had a history, that family once had a claim, and she believed them because believing them had always come with pastries and helpers and temporary solutions. She said she wanted to ask me instead of taking. I listened. I told her I would not share my house. I told her I would help her look for a place near a bus line and within their budget. I told her I would watch the twins on Thursdays if she needed shifts, not as a door to move in, but as a bridge to their own front door. I told her I would go with her to the legal aid clinic to negotiate with her landlord if she asked. She cried in a quiet, human way that had nothing to do with strategy. I believed that part. Then she asked me to withdraw the papers so our mother wouldn't be embarrassed at church. I said no. I told her love and embarrassment are not a pair, and that boundaries are not punishments. She flinched, nodded, and left without another ask. 10 minutes later, a process server with a ponytail and unmatched socks delivered the temporary restraining order to my parents' door across town. I know because my father texted me a photo of the paper and a single word, "Wow." I did not reply. The order barred them from placing devices entering my property or attempting to redirect my mail. It gave us a hearing date 2 weeks out. It felt both soon and far. That night, Dylan tried one more soft entry. He texted a photo of the twins asleep and wrote, "They miss Aunt Lila's porch." I stared at the picture until sweetness and manipulation untangled. I typed, "I love them. My porch is closed. I can meet you at the park Saturday." He left me on red. I slept with the window cracked and the new gate latched. The house exhaled. In the morning, I met Evan at the recorder again. The notice of interest had been withdrawn at 8:03 a.m. The lawyer filed a one-line release with no apology attached. The supervisor stamped my affidavit accepted and added an alert to my parcel that any future claims by the same trust would require in-person verification and a call to me before indexing. Evan grinned in that small way people do when they see justice work like a hinge instead of a hammer. We high-fived like children. Back on my block, Mr. Alden waved me over to see his tomatoes and said the word peaceful like it was a vegetable you could grow. I thanked him for standing in that moment that wanted to flood. He said he'd seen floods and knew where to plant fence posts. I spent the afternoon doing ordinary things on purpose. Vacuum lines in the rug, lemon oil on the banister. A pot of rice that filled the house with the smell of home I chose. I texted Nora a photo of the attic letter from Teresa and told her I would frame it near the porthole window. She sent back a voice note where she laughed and then cried and then said, "A blessing beats a lockbox." At sunset, I walked the block and waved at neighbors who had pretended not to watch the patrol car. The sky went orange at the edges and then slid into a blue that understood its job. Back on the porch, I wrote one more letter, this one to myself, short and plain. You enforced a boundary without becoming hard. You chose help without surrendering the decision. You honored a history by refusing a myth. You did not let anyone else narrate your home. Tomorrow, I would attend the first hearing, bring my folder, and sit up straight. Tonight, I sat on the tilt of my porch and let the lake count my breath like a metronome. The house held, and so did I. New equilibrium. The hearing room smelled like carpet and copy paper and patience. I sat beside Evan at a narrow table, my folder squared to the edge, the tin from the attic, wrapped in a towel in my bag like a talisman. Across the aisle, my parents sat with the golf lawyer faces, composed the way people arrange flowers to look effortless. Marissa and Dylan were absent, which felt honest. The judge read our filings, asked clear questions, and listened the way still water listens to a thrown stone. Evan spoke first, steady and spare, documented trespass attempt. Attempted mail fraud flagged by a federal clerk. An unrecorded but submitted notice of interest later withdrawn. Evidence of lockbox installation at dawn. Warnings already issued. A narrow request for a temporary order limited to devices entry and interference with mail or title. The lawyer tried to turn the facts into a misunderstanding wrapped in love. He spoke about family tradition implied license, the moral claim of grandchildren to a porch. The judge glanced at the photo of my 5 labeled keys and did not blink. He asked my mother if she placed the lockbox. She admitted it, then tried to add a story. He held up a hand, polite but firm. He asked if anyone had permission to enter. I said no. He asked if anyone had been invited to move in. I said no. He looked at the timeline, then at me, then at my parents, and he granted the order with clean terms that fit easily into one sentence. They were barred from entering, installing, or directing others to enter or install anything, barred from mail changes, barred from clouding title, barred from third-party work orders, and warned that violations would be contempt. He set a review hearing in 60 days and told us to use the time for sense. Outside the courtroom, my mother asked to speak to me alone. I said we could talk with Evan present. She said I had humiliated her. I said I had protected myself. She said the Soria bungalow had always been for babies. I said tradition without consent is a habit, not a right. She said I had forgotten where I came from. I said I was remembering finally with clarity. Then I unwrapped the tin and showed her Teresa's letter. She read it. For a second, her face softened, then tightened, because a blessing that does not serve your plan can feel like a door closing. She handed it back without comment and walked away very straight, the golf lawyer trotting to keep up. Evan exhaled. He told me to mark the day for what it was, not a victory over anyone, but a clean boundary that protects everyone. On the drive home, I called my grandmother and told her the order was granted. She sounded relieved and a little sad. She said my mother has always believed that love is a net that must catch everybody, even if you have to throw it over someone who doesn't want it. She said I was teaching the family a new shape. That night, I took down the warning paper and replaced it with a small brass sign by the bell. Please knock. Uninvited work will be refused. Precision without spite. Thalia sent a formal apology on letterhead and a donation receipt to a housing clinic in my name. I accepted both and wrote a review that praised their quick correction and named the harm plainly. The minivan stopped cruising my block. Alma sent a photo of a training poster she made for her staff, using my case with my name blacked out. Devin emailed a scan of the 1966 memo for my wall. Mr. Alden brought basil and an invitation to the neighborhood potluck. Kenji and Ria showed up on Friday with string lights and a clipboard labeled House Rules that was half joke, half living document. We wrote 3 lines and left room for more ask before assuming. No keys without consent. Love does not come with hardware. The days widened. I worked at my thrifted table and heard the lake like a metronome. I planted rosemary under the kitchen window because it smells like kitchens that remember their names. I framed Teresa's note and hung it by the attic ladder, where the porthole throws a circle of kind light in the late afternoon. Nora came by with a tiny bell and hung it on the back door so air could ring a reminder that movement has sound. One afternoon, the twins ran up my walk with Marissa trailing behind out of breath, waving permission to stop for 5 minutes on the porch. I said yes, sat them on the steps with Peaches, and watched their faces go bright and sticky. Marissa stood on the path and said they found a 2-bedroom near the bus line after Dylan talked to a different contractor who needed a lead installer and gave him a trial. She said the rent still hurt, but now it matched their math. She said she understood why I did what I did, even if it still stung when church people asked questions. I told her I would not answer for anyone. She said that was fair. She apologized again for the code in the lockbox, and this time she didn't pinch the truth. I believed her. I told her about Thursdays. She took the offer and wrote it in her calendar like a job. On our first Thursday, we built a pillow fort in my living room and did not take pictures. The silence felt like respect. 2 weeks later, my father called without a script in his voice. He asked about my gate and if it squeaked. He said the tomato plant Mr. Alden gave them last year had done well. He did not defend the notice or the box. He did not ask for a key. He asked how I was sleeping. Better, I said. He said good. Then he said he missed pancakes on my porch. I told him he could come by for coffee if he came as a guest, and left as one, no measuring, no forms, no deliveries. He said he could do that. He did. He brought the good beans and a bag of sweet rolls and sat in a chair like a man who had remembered his hands were for holding his own cup. We talked about weather and nothing, and I felt the quiet sort itself into something that might hold later. The review hearing came and went, with no violations on the record. The order expired by agreement and became a promise we wrote ourselves, instead of a rule we borrowed from the court. The golf lawyer sent a letter closing his file. I sent Evan a basket with tokens of gratitude and a card that said, "You made my life heavier in the places it needed weight." Alma got a small painting of the lake. Devin got a vintage pen. Mr. Alden got first pick of my basil whenever he wanted. I kept living like a person whose house fits her. I joined the potluck and brought a rice salad that tasted like the kitchen, where I learned to stir with my whole arm. I biked the path by the water and waved at the blue heron that had folded into my first morning. I fixed the flicker in my porch light with a bead of silicone and a small prayer to attention, and it stayed steady through storms. People ask if I regret calling the police filing papers, saying no. I don't. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a performance. It was a correction. It was me saying the quiet part out loud. I am allowed to keep what I built, and I am allowed to love you from my side of the fence. Sometimes on clear evenings, I climb to the attic and sit by the porthole and read Teresa's letter again. The paper is fragile, but the idea isn't. A home is a trust you choose every day. I choose it when I oil the banister, when I return a library book on time, when I send back a misdelivered package, when I text Marissa a meme, when I help Kenji troubleshoot a project, when I hand Mr. Alden a ripe tomato, and he insists it tastes better because it traveled over a fence. The story did not end with a bang. It changed routes. The house holds and I hold it, and the people around me learned where the steps are. If you were me, and the people you love tried to turn your life into a project with a lockbox and a code, where would you plant your first fence post, and what would you write on your house rules so the next person like us doesn't have to learn it the hard way?